not everyone experiences the same disaster. The 2013 flood has had a huge impact here in Alberta. The affected areas carried from Red Deer to Medicine Hat, from Banff to Glacier National Park. There were $5.51 billion in damages, 4,000 businesses were affected, and over 100,000 were displaced. Many different towns, communities, and individuals were impacted, such as High River and several First Nations reserves. Many are still displaced from their homes. The first priority when a disaster is happening is ensuring the general population is safe. Once that is done, the disaster is viewed as over, and they seem to take a step back. Often these band-aid solutions do not hold strong, as there are many factors at play that affect how an individual, family, or community experiences a disaster.
People come from different contexts, backgrounds, socioeconomic status, races, genders, marital status, ages, and geographical locations, and these can all greatly affect how it is that a disaster impacts them. These band-aid solutions are not inclusive to experience and often lead to the misinterpretation people have in understanding the effects disasters cause. Change needs to happen, but awareness is the first step. Being aware that everyone has a different experience, a different story to tell. We need to be ready to listen.
My story is different.
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 There's no doubt that climate change is real. At this moment in time, there are big and small examples of the climate changing around us, which usually translates into some sort of disaster. Often we are able to predict when a natural disaster will occur, and sometimes we are not. Often they happen in distant places around the globe, and rarely do they happen close to home. But what disasters related to climate change have in common are impressions of strife, fear, hardship, and overall negativity. Homes can be destroyed, people can be displaced, communities can be decreased in size, hope can be quickly lost. There's no doubt that lives will be changed forever. But another side of disaster that we rarely associate with tragic occurrences of climate change is the positive impacts it can have on communities. As humans, we have a natural instinct to come together during threatening times. In order for us to thrive and survive, we must put aside our differences and work together. We help each other survive, rebuild, provide care and nourishment. We as humans are resilient together. Throughout history, we see this time and time again. And what greater example of human resilience together than the 2013 flood in Alberta? The flood in Alberta affected communities large and small, including Calgary and High River. Of course, the flood significantly damaged parts of Alberta, which no one could have prepared for. But the people came together and helped each other out. Helped save people, helped rebuild houses, helped provide resources. No one was selfish, and everyone felt pride in helping out neighbors that they've never met before. It was realized that if it was every man for himself, improvement would be slow, but working collectively, it could be enjoyable and done quicker. What's neat about resilient communities and resilient humans is that once a disaster strikes, we are quick to make efforts to prevent such hardships from occurring again, or at least lessening the efforts. We work together to build greater communities, which have been shaped by climate change and naturally occurring disasters. It's pretty cool that something so terrible can make us stronger and bring us closer together.
Hey, my name's Nigel. That's me up there on the right. This is my story, or the story of how I learned to change the way I think a little bit. And it does start here in High River. High River's a great place to grow up. Close to Kananaskis, you can go camping, not all the busy hustle bustle of city life. But I was ready to go by the end of high school. So I went to Victoria. It was a mid-sized university on the coast, small class sizes, excellent reputation for psychology, which I figured I might be interested in, and I had the time of my life. But this story starts with my first class, showing up in Psychology 101 and having my professor tell me that ice cream and drowning are correlated. I didn't know what to think. Was it possible that eating more ice cream could actually make you drown? It turns out it was a simpler explanation, but one that I would have missed if I hadn't learned about the difference between correlation and causation. You see, ice cream doesn't cause drownings, but both happen to increase in the summer months. As an interesting side note, correlation would also have you believe that the more ice cream you eat, the less you'll weigh. Sometime during that first year, I learned about the story of clever Hans. Hans was a horse in Germany in the early 20th century, but he was a pretty special horse because he could do math. Hans's trainer would ask him a mathematical question, or even simple number identification such as, "Hans, what number do you see here?" Hans would respond by tapping his foot the number of times for the number of the answer or the number that he saw. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? Well, like most things, it turns out it was too good to be true. Clever Hans was using cues from his trainer to determine when he should stop. Stories like these and others I learned over the course of my university education got me thinking, why are humans so sure that the way they think is right? I mean, the brain we're using isn't very good at guessing on things like these. To me, that shows why it's so important that we inform our decisions about the big issues facing our society with science and scientific thought. Science has changed the way I think about how I think. And I think that can help us all to live a better, more productive, happier, and healthier life as a species. Thanks for watching.
Prior to the flood, views of communities in disasters held mostly negative connotations. Destruction, separation, scary, catastrophe, and severe are all words that we use to describe disasters. We never really think that something bad can happen to us. We never think about how communities would be affected if a disaster were to occur. When the 2013 flood ravaged Calgary and many outlying communities, thousands of people were negatively impacted. Families lost their homes and their livelihoods. Municipalities lost critical services and infrastructure. Lives were lost, and ways of life were lost. When a major scale event happens, feelings of loss and tragedy consume people. But the lasting impacts that disasters have don't have to be entirely negative. For me, the 2013 flood is an event that shaped my view of my community. I saw my community come together to help one another, persevere, and connect with each other to overcome loss. One particular example of this is Neighbor Day. Neighbor Day is an annual City of Calgary event that commemorates the flood and the cleanup efforts. It celebrates new friendships that were formed and the connections that were made. It also celebrates our neighbors and reminds us of the importance of helping each other. Neighbor Day fosters connections between people in the community through block parties and other celebratory events. Since the flood and introduction of Neighbor Day, I have felt more aware, connected, and proud of my community. While all these efforts have been instrumental in creating a positive outcome from a disaster in Calgary, my biggest question is, how do we make these last?
Hey Gates, you are the savior. We yelling black and gold to the Super Bowl. Black and gold to the Super Bowl. Black and gold to the Super Bowl. We yelling who that? Who that? Who that? Who that? Who that say they gon' beat them same? We yelling who that? Who that? Who that? Who that? Who that say they gon' beat them same? Case we gon' win the
man-made greenhouse gas emissions are a significant cause. Now scientists tell us the only questions are how we're going to deal with it and try to prevent it getting far worse.
Climate change. It appears as an insurmountable challenge, one that paralyzes even the most innovative among us. For those of us who haven't witnessed its devastation, it seems distant and abstract. Here's how climate change affected me. This is High River, my hometown and place of birth. It's where I grew up and experienced most of my life. A rural town in southern Alberta, High River is a folksy place, surrounded by prairies and mountains. It's a place close to my heart and filled with many of my memories. But in the summer of 2013, Alberta underwent some of the most devastating floods of recent history. Flooding destroyed communities and left many without homes. Houses and belongings were lost, and some lives changed forever. I myself was homeless, my family lost much, and I saw my community devastated. But we remained resilient, rebuilt, and persevered. This is just my story of how disaster affected me, but we all face climate change, and we all need to come together to solve one of the greatest problems of human history, for ourselves, for future generations, and for the planet.